ran her over probably didn't even really know what was going on. They're on a highway, they're going 70 miles an hour, and they're on the left lane trying to avoid this bizarre, obscure mob of freaks coming onto the highway. And one person happened to be a little too far out, and they got hit. I'm sure it wasn't on purpose, and the person clearly stopped in the video. The driver clearly slowed down and stopped. Now, this is something that these SJW scumbags love to do. They love to block highways. And, you know, it was about, August 23rd, 2015, I did an article called "The Case for Running Over Protesters Who Block Highways." And really what it comes down to is that these are not protesters. What they really are is highway terrorists. Okay, here we have a group of highway terrorists who rely on their leftist privilege to block highways knowing that nothing's going to happen to them. Recently we had a black man who was trying to drive to work so he could feed his 5 or 6 children, and he got off and angrily screamed in the face of these Black Lives Matter protesters, saying, "I gotta feed my kids, get off the fucking highway." But here are the primary reasons why I think it's justified in certain particular cases to run over highway protesters. Personally, I probably would never run over a highway protester just because I don't think I'd ever be in such an urgent situation to do that. But there are many situations where others might feel it is urgent, and we're going to get into those cases now. Let's take a look. Well, one of the reasons that highway terrorists, as I call them, are so dangerous is that they create unemployment. And this is what happens. Unemployment equals poverty, equals starvation, equals death. So literally, these protesters, highway terrorists, lead to death. Watch. We need only look at the aforementioned case of Tyree Landrum, that's the black dude who was trying to get to work to feed his kids, to realize the vast economic damage that highway terrorists can inflict upon local communities. To quote the black man trying to feed his kids, quote, "I gotta go to Ross. If I don't get there, I'm gonna get fired. I got 6 fucking kids to feed." So really, these highway terrorists are ensuring that the economy comes to a grinding halt and then people starve to death. So that's one reason why in some cases it's okay to run them over, because they're literally causing starvation. It's really racist. The second reason is because they are disrupting paramedic/firefighter rescue efforts. Let's take a look. Highways are designed to ensure the flow of traffic at higher speeds than regular streets, which is one reason paramedics and firefighters will often utilize these routes when responding to emergencies. However, when highway terrorists block freeways, ambulances are faced with an unnecessary life or death delay. In the world of EMTs and rescue operations, every second counts. Here's the third reason. Women giving birth. How about women giving birth? It is not uncommon for women to go through labor or straight up give birth while in a car and being driven or driving to the hospital. When the rate of contractions rises and that water finally breaks, sometimes being driven off to the hospital by your husband is the only option. In fact, there's one video on YouTube of a woman who had to be driven. She was giving birth practically in the damn car. She gave birth to a 10-pound baby in the car, actually. So the point is that there are severe medical issues that are inhibited when people cannot use the highway to get to the hospital on time, and these highway terrorists, otherwise known as protesters, get in the way. And so again, I'll put the link to this article below so you guys can take a look at it and you guys can read it for yourself. And the truth is, I think that there's a better way to deal with highway protesters. You may not always have to run them over, even though it's always a tragedy that they slow down the economy, even though it's always a tragedy that they don't allow dying old women in ambulances to get to the hospital on time. I mean, that's how racist and misogynist and sexist these SJW protesters are. These anti-Trump protesters hate women because they want old ladies in ambulances to die. I mean, what kind of sick misogynism?
You can justify just about any atrocious thing through the use of hypothetical victims. This is something that's referred to on Twitter as whataboutism. Whataboutism is like the point in fishhook theory where centrists and the far right start to agree on like really, really atrocious stuff. And I think what it is I think what's going on is for centrist liberals and right wingers, the human cost of these ideas. It's all for centrists. It's academic. For right wingers like this red pill philosophy guy, it's deliberate. You see, red pill philosophy is a standard issue right winger, right? He starts from the conclusion that he hates somebody. He hates protesters. He hates left-wing protesters. He hates communists. He hates Black Lives Matter. But in order for him to take action against these people, he has to make their lives incidental to the liberals in the existing establishment, because the establishment never contains the left. The establishment always contains liberals, like Democrats, and conservatives, like the Republicans. But the Republicans are pulled way more by the right wing. And they themselves, conservatives, are very much so able to manipulate liberals by turning human beings into theory. That, I think, is at the heart of this argument that was really when Heather Heyer got killed in Charlottesville by a Nazi driver. All I could think of was how many mainstream right-wing politicians and media outlets and YouTubers, including some centrists, reacted to BLM, the proposal of BLM protesters making it legal to run them over, with a very sort of a technocratic explanation of what about filling the victim? What about old ladies on the way to the hospital? As if there's only one road, one highway going anywhere. You can't drive locally anywhere. It's as if protesters don't protest, there'll never be a traffic jam again. As though EMTs are not trained to circumvent traffic. As if compassionate left-wing protesters, bleeding hearts in the street, are going to hear an ambulance siren and go, fuck the police, and not let an ambulance that obviously has someone in a serious situation make it to the hospital. Protesters who are out there to defend the sanctity of human life via Black Lives Matter are going to let someone die in an ambulance. Think about this shit. So the right-wingers just want to kill protesters, because the right wing, like, the eventual endpoint of the right wing is always purity via cleansing, right? So they have to create these rationalizations, not for themselves, because they don't give a fuck. They know they want to kill protesters specifically because this was a reaction to BLM originally. But they can persuade somebody in the center, like I remember quite a few people that considered themselves in the center before the actual death of Heather Heyer, before it stopped being theoretical. And then, I mean, at least I'll give centrist liberals the benefit of the doubt that once shit got real, and once an actual protester, once they saw it in practice, what the right wing meant by having to drive through left-wing protesters, a lot of these centrists that supported it either pretended that they didn't, or, as usual, once there was an actual human victim that they would have to be liable for, they disavowed that they ever even supported the idea that there's some kind of justifiable homicide in driving over protesters. The free speech absolutists, maximalists, they want free speech for Nazis. They want free speech for pedophiles. And meanwhile, if you use your free speech, because that's what a fucking protest is. A protest is a disruption. That's what a fucking protest is. There's no point to a protest that does not disrupt something in the fabric of society so people actually pay attention. The McDonald's Fight for 15 protest may not have gone into the highway, but can you imagine if local police officers made that case, how many fucking liberals would have been against the Fight for 15 just because, well, you know, they're blocking the sidewalk? And what about people who have to deliver mail? And what about people that are walking to work on the sidewalk? They should be able to just kick their way through the protesters. And then the anti-labor right-wingers would go, that's true. That's absolutely true. Look, think about, what if there's an old lady that's walking to the hospital and these guys are filling up the sidewalk with all this marching and signs and stuff? It should be justified sometimes, just a little bit, maybe to kick one or two of these protesters to death. What's the big deal? The old lady, the pregnant woman walking to the hospital by herself, she's innocent. And we need to defend a future for white. You see how they always eventually get to that talking point? The right wing always has a moral justification for atrocities committed against their political enemies. When the shoe was what's important to me about Charlottesville is that now the shoe's on the other foot. Now the right wing wants to be activists. All of a sudden, you see them slowly easing up. Now that they're switching from being passive to being active in the street. Now being in the street's important. Now organizing is important. Oh, running over. Let me tell you, if one of the counter-protesters had a medical emergency, right? Let's say somebody had a heart attack. On the Antifa side, and accidentally ran over one of these tiki torch Nazis, you would have seen Fox News, President Trump, Breitbart, if Stormfront actually still existed beyond the dark web, you would see the right-leaning skeptics like Worski scream at the top of their fucking lungs, I don't care if that motherfucker was having a heart attack and giving birth to a baby at the same time, and the driver was 85 years old and having a stroke. Free speech.